Is there such a thing as Star Wars fatigue? And people out there might argue, yes. Yes, there is. Yes, there is such a thing as Star Wars fatigue. And look, I don't know. I haven't hit it yet. I'm just going to start off by saying that one. I don't know. I haven't hit it yet. Now, it says here, playing franchise protagonist Luke Skywalker through 6 of the 9 films, Hamill's been on both ends of praise and scorn from his debut in the original trilogy to the more controversial sequel trilogy, particularly The Last Jedi. Well, that's very true. But then again, Mark Hamill is not so much like praise and scorn. He was praised for Luke by practically everyone. It was all about how he felt about Luke Skywalker's story, his arc, his finale, if you will, in episode 8, and why it was such a slap in the face to fans. So I don't know why they're really saying scorn from his debut. I wasn't around in 77, so I don't know if they originally shat on Mark Hamill, but my generation that grew up in the 80s and 90s, we love Mark Hamill. We think he's great in that role, and he's even better as the Joker. So, you know what? I don't know where this scorn comes from. I'm going to have to sit there and say citation needed, bleeding cool. I don't know why you're not providing citation to that. But anyway, no, Rian Johnson who gets the crap. And Mark Hamill's even called out Rian Johnson multiple times. Even though every time he does kind of talk a little bit of truth, he spits that fire about the movie, he always kind of backtracks it a little bit because he's still a professional and doesn't want to, alienate anyone in the business. And I'm sure he actually likes Rian Johnson, just that he really dislikes where things went. Now, he spoke to The Hollywood Reporter about the abundance of Star Wars content across TV and film, Solo underachieving at the box office and his show. And he says here, when asked if audiences grow tired from the overstimulation that can come from the Star Wars franchise, Hamill admitted that this is definitely a strong possibility, saying, yes, I'm not going to tell them how to run their business, but is there a possibility of Star Wars fatigue? Yes, I think there is. I've experienced it to a certain degree, but they never listened to my idea anyway, so who needs them? Okay, so let's kind of break that down for a second. Is there a Star Wars fatigue for Mark Hamill? Yeah. I would argue that there absolutely is. And that makes a lot of sense because he's been in this for 40 plus years. The movie came out May 5th, 1977, or I think, no, May 25th, 1977. Sorry. And they shot the movie in 1976, which means that he would have been cast in probably 1975 and been working on the movie for a while during pre-production before shooting it. And then, so you figure from 1975, respectfully, to now, 2019, that's 44 years. 44 years of every time he goes anywhere, it's, hey, yo, Luke. Hey, yo, Luke. Do the sounds, man. Do it, brother. I'm sure he gets that all the time. Also gets a whole bunch of, do the Joker, Luke. Come on, do the Joker. Do the Joker. You can do it. Yeah, he gets a lot of that, too. Mark Hamill is a staple in pop culture. I'd argue that Luke Skywalker in the last 50 years is probably the most important character to pop culture. And we're talking not just the last 50 years, but ever. There are people out there that genuinely love this man for playing this role. So the way I look at it essentially is this. Yes, he's important to the role. He's important to the franchise. So to him, having lived it for, at this point, 2/3 of his life, this fatigue makes a lot of sense. But let's break it down in regards to what we have for Star Wars and whether or not there is fatigue. Now, if you look at it from maybe a comic book perspective or a novel perspective with the EU and everything else, yeah, maybe one could argue that. But no one ever said Star Wars fatigue leading up to the purchase of Lucasfilm from Disney and then Disney killing the EU. People were mad about that because they loved it. So one could argue that the fatigue aspect of it doesn't even really apply. Star Wars comics lived for years, going between Marvel and I believe even Dark Horse had it for a while. No one ever complained about Star Wars fatigue in comics. There we go. 2008, right? Even with the prequel trilogy, no one complained of Star Wars fatigue. They complained about bad movies. They complained about bad acting, wooden dialogue, and really kind of plots. Yeah, Phantom Menace. I'm looking at you. So they've said that for years, but no one ever said Star Wars fatigue. Then 2008 rolls around, we get that really bad Star Wars Clone Wars movie that led into a show that kind of had a bit of a rocky start, but by the end of it was a force on television, pun intended, that people absolutely lost their shit over. And when they announced at Celebration last year that they were going to be, was it Celebration or Comic-Con? I forget when, but whatever, when they announced last year that Clone Wars is coming back for a 7th and final season, people lost their shit. People absolutely lost their shit. So one could argue, even in regards to that, that fatigue doesn't exist. Even with the Rebels TV series, had 4 seasons, told a very good, complex, satisfying story. Fans were crying at the end. No one can argue fatigue on that front. But then you look at even Resistance right now, which is doing well enough on Disney XD in order to get a 2nd season, and no one's arguing about fatigue over that. But what they're talking about fatigue is the movies. Now, the movies suffered a very, very, very big problem, and that is the fact that episode 8 was a crap fest, and that led into Solo, which is a movie that people like to argue nobody asked for. But to be fair, we don't really ask for much that we get anyway, so screw it. I think that's a dead argument. I think it's a dead, dumb argument. You can't really argue that Solo is a movie nobody asked for, when every movie that comes out ultimately is a movie nobody asked for. Well, nobody asked for Star Wars, said somebody in 1977. Here we are 40 some odd years later, and who the fuck is that guy? That's right, nobody. Who cares? Movies come and movies go. The problem ultimately boiled down to this. Solo was a middling product. I really liked it. I've watched it multiple times on home video, and it's one of my favorite movies from last year. I really enjoyed it, and it gets better every time I watch it. And a lot more people who avoided it in the cinemas also enjoyed it on Netflix or on home video, and they also like it. So it is finding its home there, but it's, you know, clearly it's a failure, and there's no denying that. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of hardcore Star Wars fans felt ultimately betrayed by The Last Jedi. I think Mark Hamill coming out saying that Star Wars fatigue is a thing only really applies to him, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Billy D. Williams, Anthony Williams, you know, Peter Mayhew, James Earl Jones, Kenny Baker, may he rest in peace, you know, and anyone, George Lucas, and anyone else associated with Star Wars from the beginning. Those people are the only ones that can really argue Star Wars fatigue. What people are really arguing now in regards to the controversy surrounding The Last Jedi is a bad movie. We could handle a bad movie with Lucas at the helm. We did that with The Phantom Menace and ultimately Attack of the Clones. Now, upon later reflection, I think Attack of the Clones got a lot better. To be honest with you, if you look at it from more of a political theater mindset, I think it's a lot better. And Revenge of the Sith was dope. Fuck you, fight me on that one. But the thing is that we've dealt with bad and mediocre before. But the thing is, those movies still held to a continuity. Those movies still held to an overall arc. Yeah, we might have known where things were going, but we didn't know exactly how the trail got there. We just knew the end point. We kind of know where things are going now, but we still don't know how to get to that end point. The problem with it is what was laid out before us in episode 7 was completely pissed on in episode 8. So much so that even Abrams is like, remember, you know, he came out and admitted basically that he didn't know, that he didn't, that there, you know, he's like, I got to start from scratch on this one because that motherfucker over there decided to completely shut on my work, you know? So the problem here with the fatigue is Rian Johnson. That's the fatigue. What Disney did in regards to releasing Solo 6 months later, thinking they had a surefire $2 billion success on their hands with The Last Jedi, is the problem. They should have bumped Mary Poppins to 2019. Seriously, bump it to, like, I don't know, March. I know they had Captain Marvel, but wait like 2 weeks and put it out after that, or wait till Mother's Day. I don't even know. You should have bumped Mary Poppins, put Solo in its place. Solo would have been a year post the Last Jedi controversy. Most of the people who were complaining about it would have gotten the fuck over it, and a lot of other people would have just moved on with their life, and they probably would have gone and seen it because at the time it was up against Aquaman, and well, quite frankly, nobody knew Aquaman was going to do what it was going to do. So even my hypothetical here, my theoretical, doesn't necessarily jive when looking at the actual box office results, considering how well Aquaman did, but it would have done better than it did on Memorial Day up against Deadpool 2's second weekend. That's what I'm trying to say here. If you look at how Disney handled it, and they bungled it with episode 8 and the controversy surrounding Solo, which already denigrated a lot of people's interest coming off of what happened in June of 2017 when they fired Phil Lord and Chris Miller and replaced it with Ron Howard. So that was already a situation where people were like, ooh, you know, things here may not be what they seem. And then the controversy surrounding Last Jedi and going into that, like, I don't want to keep repeating myself. I'm thinking like I'm talking in a circle here, but I think you guys are getting what I'm trying to say. At the end of the day, the only real bungling here is Kathleen Kennedy and the leadership at Lucasfilm. Mark Hamill has Star Wars fatigue. The rest of us, not really. because we haven't had enough over the years to really get bottlenecked into the last couple. I mean, if we can sit there and stomach 3 Marvel movies a year, a couple DC films a year, and every other attempt at a shitty freaking cinematic universe, we can stomach 1 Star Wars movie a year. It's not the end of the world. The problem with it is, though, is that the expectations are so vastly different per person that it ends up becoming a problem. And the people out there that want to tell these stories are having trouble condensing it into just a movie. But they also screwed up by going into this new trilogy without a coherent plan in place, which makes no sense to me whatsoever, but that's where they dropped the ball, and that's where we are right now. So the way I view it is this. No, Star Wars fatigue isn't there. If we were getting 3 movies a year and they were all mediocre and they were all bad, but Disney kept forcing it down our throats, then I would agree. But getting a couple TV series, a few books, some comics, and a new park, not the end of the damn world, in my opinion. Not by a long shot, and I don't think a lot of you really think that way either.